Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm your host, Jack Greenstock, joined as always by an amazing panel. I'm going to pass it over first to Spartan Grown.
Thanks, Jack. What's up, everybody? I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown, all one word. That's the only social media that I'm on. Anything else is probably a copycat. If you don't do Instagram, you can get a hold of me on just through an email, spartangrown@gmail.com, and I can help you with both your organic or your synthetic growing questions. I had a brain fart there.
Always happy to have you back. I like the amended introduction there, to be most accurate. But next up, we got Brandon Rust.
You're muted, Brandon.
Right. What's going on, everybody? Brandon Rust here. It's been a minute. Been staying pretty busy, working on a lot of cool stuff. But it's always glad to be back. Chop it up, talk shop. You can find me at Instagram at rust.brandon. And you can find my company, Bokashi Earthworks, www.bokashiearthworks.com.
Good to have you back as always. Next up, Matthew Gates.
Hey everyone, this is Matthew Gates. I'm an integrated pest management specialist, and you can check out some cool free educational information on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol, which is also the channel I'm commenting in the chat with. You can also find me for professional inquiries at zenthanol.com. I handle training for pest recognition and pest treatment, as well as other information regarding pests and how to deal with them.
Happy to have you back. And next up, Kyle Breeder.
Hey everybody, Kyle Breeder here. I just want to say thanks for, I feel like it's been quite a while since I've been here, but maybe it hasn't. But yeah, if anyone's looking for some feminized seeds, which is what I specialize in, I have a website. It's purebreeding.com. I actually just launched a brand new seed line on Saturday. So if anybody's interested in that, I still have some packs left if you are interested. And yeah, Instagram's pure_breeding. Facebook and Twitter is pure breeding, and yeah, just happy to be here.
Happy to have you back. Next up, last and certainly not least, who's with us right now, the American one.
Hello, Jack, Spartan, Rust. Rust Brandon. I always get you mixed up because your first IG was Rust Brandon. I thought your name was Rust for a while, but I digress. Matthew Gates, Kyle, it's all good. Always good to see you boys and everyone in chat. I'm the American one. And yeah, it's always good to talk cannabis. And yeah, great to be here.
So a little bit before the show, I just kind of came up with an idea of a topic for tonight's session that we could maybe start off with. It's actually two separate topics. And the first one I labeled in the title for anybody who already checked that out and is astute like that will know that it is pot size. And the other topic will be plant training. And then we'll probably spitball into I think Matthew has another topic, and then we can maybe even take some chat Q&A depending on how long those go for. But I wanted to start off, we talked a little bit about grow mediums and different ways to grow the plant. But one of the things that we didn't really specify much was the pot size. And that's something that actually does matter quite a bit. And I know a lot of people have a lot of different techniques. So I figured I'd go around the panel and give everybody kind of a chance to describe their strategy with different pot sizes, what they start off in, how often do they transplant, and what size pot do they finish in. So I'll pass it first, just like I did in introductions, back to Spartan Grown.
Thanks. Yeah, I actually have transitioned to not using a lot of pot changes. I don't do a lot of transplanting. What I do in my personal grow is I end up in a sip container, and a sip container it'll hold 1.5 cubic feet of soil, which puts it somewhere in between, I think, a 10 and a whatever the next size up, 15, somewhere in between that gallon pot. So I usually, I do. So I go from a cutting or a clone size, and I'll go into a 1 gallon, usually a 1 gallon from that. And then from the 1 gallon, once it gets rooted out in a 1 gallon, I go right into my final pot, and I don't really deviate from that. And both pots are plastic. I do have some fabric pots that I've played with and grown in before, but those are mostly used outside for vegetables and things like that. I don't care for the fabric pots so much.
So your smallest size pot you would go into would be a 1 gallon, it sounds like, if you're starting from a clone.
Yeah. Well, I would consider, I mean, I have gone from like, sometimes I've gotten cups, like a clone in a cup. So whatever cup size is, and then from that to a one. But yeah, I would consider going smaller. I would go into a half gallon and then to the one, but
If you
I
were
don't
starting
like,
a seed, would you
if I was
go in
starting
like,
a seed, I would probably go from, so that I start seeds in a root riot cube. So I would wait until I see a root come out of that cube and then I plant it. And I usually would plant it into a 1 gallon pot from that.
and I'm
from
guessing
that
like a true 1 gallon, like a 1 gallon plastic pot, which is
Yeah.
not actually a gallon, but it's like a shovel full of soil typically. Um, Funny enough, I use a 1 gallon pot that's made by Easy Swap Pots, and it's not one
Like a
gallon
2 gallon.
of
Yeah.
soil. It's actually like 1 gallon, 1 gallon. And compared to other 1 gallon pots, it's probably double the size. It's closer to 2 full gallons. And so that does make a difference. I start off in the solo cups personally, and then I transplant into a 1 gallon Easy Swap pot before, similar to Spartan, I go into not a city picker, but a earth box, which is about 1.5 to 2 cubic feet of soil, like between 10 and 15 gallons, depending on how high you fill it up and how much of the reservoir is filled up and things like that. But it's very solid strategy, I think, for soil. But I'm curious, Kyle, breeder, what size pots do you like to get started in, and how often do you transplant into what sizes?
Yeah, so mainly I'm pure indoors, so I have ceiling height restrictions, so I'm kind of forced to, and I'm more about numbers because I'm typically breeding, or so I'm looking for more pollen donors or pollen receivers. So there's a lot of in and outs a lot of times, so I'm forced to kind of use smaller pots purposely, and so I start off in solo cups, and then once they get pretty well rooted in there, where I'm on like almost an everyday feed, that's when I know that they're getting pretty beefed up inside of those solos. I'll either go to I'll go to a 1 gallon if I'm trying to like burn some time up, so that way they can kind of chill in there for a little bit. But so I'll either go from a solo to a 2 gallon if I'm going to flower in that. Maybe I'll let them acclimate for a week or two in the 2 gallon and then flip them. But if I'm trying to get some height on them and maybe max out my tents, I'll let them get kind of full in the 1 gallons and then jump to a 3 and then flower them out. And seems to work out pretty well for the most part.
And I guess I'll follow that up with a question like, how tall / wide are your plants by the finish typically? And you could give a range.
So all my breeding tents are like 6 foot, 6'6", I want to say. And I mean, I try not to let them go. I don't know, maybe like from where the soil is, maybe like maybe 2.5 feet, 3 feet, like that. And then, like I was telling you guys last time, I've been like, Dr. MJ says I'm stunting them, or however you want to kind of paint the picture. I mean, it kind of just works as a tool in my mind. But I'll basically do like polar opposites. I'll do 6 hours of light, 18 hours of darkness, just so I've just found that with some of the varieties that I'm working with, that they're not stretching as hardcore as I were if I were just to go to 12 and 12, and that allows me to get some extra. It just it simplifies any complications and smashing into the lights, and now I have like all kinds of issues and stuff like that. So
yeah, I think that his philosophy is just that he would rather veg for a shorter time, flip, and then take advantage of the stretch versus vegging for a longer time, flipping, and then having less stretch and flower. But it's all just management practices. And I was just curious because pot size, I do think ultimately impacts the plant size. Like if to Oregon or Northern California, you see these 1,000-gallon pots where they're growing 10+ pound plants. It makes sense because they have enough to feed that plant, and it's got a long enough veg time and a long enough flower season to produce that amount. But us indoors are going for pretty much as fast of a veg as possible, and then flowering and whatever its flower time is. So Spartan, with your pots, how big would you like the plants to get? You can like a range from shortest to the tallest, and then how wide do you typically grow them? Because I think you use the city picker.
Yeah, my canopy is usually, my canopies always are trying to fill a 2x2 space because I have 4 plants in a 4x4. So if I can cover a 2x2 space, so that's usually the width. But as far as height goes, it's always between 3 to 4 feet tall. Unless unless there's a sativa in there that surprises me or something that's super stretchy that I wasn't aware of. And, and I didn't plan for that, then they can get up to 5 feet tall maybe, but it's generally 3 to 4 feet tall. And 5 feet tall is stupid, ridiculous, getting burned up by the lights height. It's not production. That's not a good height.
What's your roof or ceiling height like, and like how high can you raise it up?
I can, so with the GML, I'm pretty lucky in that those bar lights spread it. So they're so spread out that I can get within, so I've had plants within 12 inches and they were fine of the bar light. And let me see, it's probably 6'5" at the shortest the shortest height in that space, probably 6'5"-ish. And so when you add the light and then those city pickers are a lot like your earth boxes that they sit on wheels too. So I probably lose at least, I would say at least a foot between the pot and the light hanging distance. So I could probably go 5'5" to really be at the light, but no, I mean, I don't ever want to get to that point.
It makes management a lot more difficult for sure. The American one, I know that you are someone growing in pots right now, and I'm curious what size you start off in and how you can transplant. And same question those guys answered.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because I was thinking like Kyle straight away about well, I start my clones all differently all the time. So if they're in a solo cup, I go to 1 gallon. I go to 1 gallon, and I go to either a 5 gallon or a 7 gallon container right now. But I am aspiring to get 10 gallons all the way around, and I'll just go right from the 1 gallon probably into the 10 gallon because I don't like I don't know. I don't want to have tons of different kind of sizes. So I heat 3 gallon pots for some reason. I don't know. I got a thing, but I love the number 3. But anyway, um, it all depends on like when you were saying, I had like for a while over the winter, it was really cool because I had my plants in 1 gallon containers, and the temperature and the low lighting kept them happy without having them grow out of their space for a longer time, which I like because I have a lot of things I want to keep. So when they get too big, you have to, especially the way I do with organics, unless I want to start figuring out better cheese. But in general, when they outgrow the container, you got to upplant or else they won't be happy really. So it's good if you have a spot where they can kind of chill and not grow so quickly and stay happy and alive. That's one of the things. And I'm really interested in the city picker / earthbox sip technology. I think I'm going to have to give that a try. And I just happened across an IG post where like to have an insert that you could put into any container and turn it into a sip bucket, but it has to be a certain size. They have ones for 5 gallon, but the one I saw was for 8 gallon or more. So I think I'm thinking about trying that. But and I'm also considering, I think I'm going to make like a no-till bed. I'm going to take one of my 4x4s and get a 4x4 2-foot high container, fill the whole thing. You know what I'm saying? Because like a bed. Because yeah, I'm starting to believe in that magic a little more and more as I see things and learn things, and when the roots can share each other and all that kind of stuff. I'm really going to do that, I think, soon. But I initially didn't want to because to move it, or God forbid a pop-up inspection has to happen or anything like that. That's when it might become an issue then.
I'm with you,
But
man. And I don't like transplanting into flower. I hate fucking that.
Yeah, if they're like, yeah. Because that's kind of what you have to do, unless you're going to dedicate the whole tent to a slight veg. That's what I just did recently too. I'm kind of loving that because yeah, that makes a world of difference. Because I've only done it a few times where I use my like quote flowering tent, but I move the plants in there and keep them under 18.6 because they get in different lighting in my particular instance. And once you can see them get comfortable in their new home and then flip them to flower, they're a lot better and happier.
Yeah.
Oh shit! There was something else that just popped in my head that pops back out. All right. Well, if I happen to think of it, I'll barge in and interrupt somebody. But
I do the same with because like my earth box stays in my flower tent. Instead of having it always in flower, like I'll have my harvest and then my next crop end up in veg. So as soon as I chop, I can transplant in, and then instead of going straight to flower, I'll give them usually a full week, sometimes a little I'm noticing they just took off like 1 or 2 days in, clearly tapped down to the bottom of the water and are just thriving and growing like right away. But usually just a full week to be safe.
Yeah.
But
Oh, now I remember. I remember because of the time where I was saying like I took it right from the solo cup and put it into the 5 gallon, and that did not work. We were talking about how it helps when they give them a smaller space, let the roots fill in that space,
Yeah.
and then upplant them. The plant grows so much quicker. It's unbelievable. I don't know like why, but it definitely makes a difference. So
it's that stepping up. I think the root mass, it fills up most of the pot that it's in. Instead of going from like a solo cup to a 5 gallon, which is huge, that solo cup's only going to fill up like 5% of a 5 gallon. But if you go into a 1 gallon, fill full 1 gallon or 2 gallon, and those
right.
roots get transplanted into a 5 gallon, then they have more access and more areas they're starting from to fill out that 5 gallon or whatever. So
Yeah.
stage transplanting should and can work if it's done well. If you have a bunch of transplant shock, it will slow down your plants, like if you just completely mangle them. But
Right.
with proper technique, it's possible. And the one thing before I pass it to Brandon, I'll say a benefit of 10 gallon versus 3 gallons, more room for crystals. So
There you go.
always good. But Brandon, as far as this goes, pot sizing, I know that you finished in beds in your commercial setups, but I'm curious, home growing or generally even commercial cultivation space, what's your preference for pot size starting, and then how often do you transplant, and what do you fish in? And then last question would be how large do you expect the plants to be at finish height and width?
So pot size doesn't matter so much as nutritional sufficiency in the media that you're using. And a good example of this is you've seen guys grow in Dixie cups with hydronutrients and pull out, 4-foot plant. Right. So there's no clear one concise answer about plant size and pot size. It's all about the nutritional sufficiency of the media that they're growing in, whether that is balanced and how much of it is there, as well as your environment, your lighting, all the other parameters. When it comes to
While I
pot
agree with it, I do think that like a 1,000 gallon pot is going to have to grow more than a 10 gallon pot. Obviously, it takes up more space. You're going to have more veg time and all that good stuff. But like a hydro, you can push it to a point. Like I've grown in cocoa as small as like 1 gallon pots, and I know people do the solo cup challenge and get 2-3 foot tall plants. Like I've been able to pull 12 ounces out of a 1 gallon pot in cocoa, but I could never do that in soil. So I do think the media or medium matters. I guess if I was hitting it with like some of
Yeah.
the
If you're
humates, like
giving it
N-humate,
water
K-humate, and things like that.
nutrients, then it doesn't matter so much what the media is, right?
Not as much, but I think that it still matters to an
It makes a
extent.
difference. Yeah. Yeah.
But you could also have 1,000-gallon pot with soil that's insufficient and not have the growth that you expected. So again, it's really about the nutritional sufficiency with whatever cultivation style you're using. Me personally, for commercial application, I like beds. And the reason why I do beds is because they hold nutritional sufficiency and balance longer. So that way I can do less frequent testing. And the idea is to create the most cost-effective models for operations. And so, I've also decreased my bed size to 12 inches because through all my experience, I never really saw the roots of cannabis really go past that point. So you have all this media underneath, and it's unnecessary. So it's less soil volume, less amendments that have to go into a space, but it's a sufficient amount to keep things balanced almost through an entire run. If you hit right in the beginning of flower and you get everything to nutritional sufficiency, you could do a whole run, and that's, even in a 7 or 10 or 15-gallon pot, you could do the same thing. However, that soil might require a little more maintenance because if you do have a bigger plant, it will deplete nutrition faster. And things will go out of balance faster, especially if they're highly biologically active. You have to remember that biological systems release organic acids and enzymes that drop the soil pH.
Brandon,
So
did you notice when you made that change to the 12 inches, a watering difference too? Like, did they
Yeah.
consume?
So when you decrease the soil volume, you decrease the input, because if we're looking at something like, hey, you need X amount of nutrient per yard of soil. And if you
Right.
have a bed that's 22 yards versus something like 15,
15.
it makes a huge difference in the amount that you'll have to put into that soil to keep it sufficient, the volume, and then also the amount of water you're going to be using. So it cuts costs from not just one perspective, but from many, many different perspectives, you know.
Wouldn't dryback rate in a smaller volume of soil be a little bit quicker, and in my perspective have benefit, because then you're able to water a little bit more frequently? They take the water up, some evaporates, but some of it's taken up by the plant, and then you can water again earlier without having as much of a risk
Yeah,
of overwatering.
especially if you have an automated watering or fertigation system in which you could, you know, set those parameters, then absolutely.
I will say 2020 Mendocino, they do a mixed light greenhouse in Northern California, Mendocino, and they did an experiment where they have these mats underneath their beds versus like top watering. And I think they said they increased by 20 to 25% yields, and like their cannabinoids and everything went up with the bottom watering, where they just basically like flooded it from beneath and it absorbed the water up. So that might be something to potentially look into as somebody who's growing in fabric beds or that kind of style, because I saw it have great benefit for them, and I think it could also just help management. If
I would definitely want to see the data, and not just something that a farm said, hey, we tried this and it worked. You know, I'd like to see it replicated, because doing something like that would take so much effort. And really, when it comes down to it, with the systems that I run, it's super minimal, man. I mean, these things operate, they function really, really well because of simplicity. You know, it's like an old car that has a roll down window, turn knob, right? That thing's less likely to break than, you know, a new car that requires electronics and whatnot. So some
I
things
agree
have
with
the
that.
benefit being simple, you know. More complex systems have more points of failure, and that's one of the things.
How does the water get delivered to your bed?
So you have a fertigation system that's hooked up to a timer, and it'll pump in a certain volume of water. And
Is
then
it
some
like
people
top
are
water through a mister though? I'm like physically, how is it traveling into the from the tank to the soil?
how is it traveling?
Like, are you watering it with a hose, or are you
Oh,
having?
it's everything will be plumbed in. You know, we'll have overhead drop down fertigation system that sits at the beginning of the bed, so it's out of the way. And what we can do is we can do auto disconnect on them. They'll have independent zones, and those zones are hooked up to a timer. It says, hey, we're going to turn on zone 1, and then zone 2 will go, you know, and it'll watch each additional length of bed. When, you know, that's for a fully automated system. Some people are hand watering. I have a guy that's in pots, and he has a fertigation system where it is just similar to that, except it has like a cone and it sprays the top, so it does the whole surface. And you know, he programs it to how long he wants to water. He makes sure that he fully saturates his soil without any runoff.
I like that. The runoff, I feel like, can be one, just a waste of water, but two, it can make for anaerobic conditions where if they're like sitting directly in the drip tray or whatever, that water can sit around and cause some negative conditions if you don't have the good microbial communities that you would get with like a micro plus or something like that, or EM1 or EM5. So I definitely think that that's a very effective system and solution. There's just so many ways to go about it.
Oh yeah.
The thing that I brought up, I guess, was it'd be more like you set it up before the grow starts. And I'm pretty sure it's just like a porous mat that is laid underneath the soil. I'm trying to find the post. This was from like over a year ago, but they're recreational / medical cannabis grow here in California. And they did have the data as well, because they test all of their crops. They weigh all the yields, both like the stuff that they pull off the plant and harvest for sale and things like that. So it's an interesting one. If I do find it, I'll make sure to pop it up and plug what
So
the actual name of the system was.
the tricky part about drybacks in living systems is that when you start creating conditions that aren't conducive to the biology, they'll start to sporulate, right? And they have this waxy coating, and it's hydrophilic. And you could see this in really dry dirt, how it floats on the surface of water. same principle. You could have hydrophobic conditions, and if you're not using something like a surfactant or something that can readily rehydrate the system in its entirety and allow all of those root zones to be fully hydrated so that the mineral nutrition diffuses into the water, that can complicate things too. So I can understand how having something that's feeding from the bottom that always has access to some moisture could keep a more consistently moist soil. But I think that when we start to, as you know, I'm working with some other people, and we're putting together some data and making tools to like monitor these parameters like they do in hydroponics, but for living soil. So we'll see. You'll be able to see not just from a nutritional standpoint, but you'll be able to see EC, hydrology, temperature, everything on the analytics like real soon in these soil systems. And then we'll be able to create, data analytics for how the nutrition plays in with all of things like drybacks and hydrology, the pH of the soils, the EC of the soil,
You get somebody needs to invent a way to a box that I can throw a fucking spoon of soil in and get a fucking result, a soil test back that way immediately. Even
That's
if I had
more
to wait
tricky.
30 minutes, that'd be nice.
That's a little more tricky because you have to use something like gas mass spectrometry machines,
Mass spectrometers.
and things that can rapidly like combust these elements so they can see the actual mineral nutrition. I don't think there's a technology right now, and there might be, but it's not metered, it's not calibrated, and it would take data analytics to do the calibration to figure out real-time mineral nutrition in the ionic available form. So if we wanted to see KO2 or potassium hydroxide, which is the mineral that the potassium element that plants utilize, sequester, we would have to have a specific instrument for that. So we would be looking at something with like 20 different sensors that would all have to be calibrated. And so if the technology does exist, it would be so inexpensive. It would be so expensive to like
No,
hell up.
the next time you get your soil dialed in perfect, after you get your soil test back and you amend it, just take a mouthful and let it sit there for like 2 minutes. And then you just taste test every soil that before you put your plant in. If it tastes the same, you're good to go.
Yeah,
Well, and you
there
have
you
to
go.
do
It's solved.
multiple samples. You can't do it just once. You have to do it like a bunch of times.
We'll have to
and
start
you have
a
to make sure that the
soil
manure is fully
Gangier class.
composted, though.
There you go. All mouths are the most have the most sensors in the world, I bet, except perhaps a certain organ on a woman.
I want to shout out Anova in chat real quick because I'm too lazy to type a response. But they've asked if you can use Dawn dish soap for a surfactant, and you absolutely can. Just a drop into your even a 5-gallon bucket, it would still be sufficient. But I do a drop in a gallon and when for a foliar spray. Or you can use yucca. That's a really good one. It's really inexpensive.
Kiaha is probably one of the best ones because of the amount of saponins that it contains. And it also has things like gibberellins, auxins, and cytokinin.
And you can get super like NPK nutrient cells, a real pure form of it. But I mean, it will last you. You buy one bag of it, it'll last. Get the small bag, and it'll last you a long, long time because it's a ridiculous amount. It's like I don't even have a measurement that small of a teaspoon in a like 5-gallon batch. So it's literally fucking a tiny amount. I think Dr. Coco actually has recommended that before. I mean, I think it's a good idea just to use it every watering. It's so inexpensive, and why not? It's just going to help.
And if for the people who don't understand how surfactants work, surfactants lower the surface tension of water. And so what can happen is when you have a higher concentration gradient of like a nutrient in soil and you water, it can help move that and distribute it more evenly throughout the system. And so it can help with the distribution of nutrient, but it also helps to hydrate the soil. That makes sense.
Water is the highway for the microbes. So you want to make sure you got water in the soil.
Yeah, when you guys are talking about like the drybacks, I forget if anyone here does this, but I know that I've encountered people who their intent is to make like the microbiology, the microbiota in their soil, like more resilient to things like drought by like doing drybacks and basically sort of terrorizing their soilscape. And it's interesting. For one thing, they're not like confirming what they have in there or anything like that oftentimes. So, I mean, obviously that's critical to being able to do that at all. But I don't know. I think that that's sort of a simplified perspective. Not saying anyone else here was saying it, just reminds me of this sort of perspective. You might be able to make the argument that in certain environments, the microbes are going to be more resilient to that, a lot of them, if they're naturally occurring in that location. But I guess it just reminds me that not all adaptations are necessarily good ones. And just because you have that sort of system doesn't mean that the microbes are like quickly adapting to it. You know what I mean? Like it's presumptuous to think that.
Yeah, the common adaptation that they're gonna have is spoil it. like what Brandon was just saying, they're gonna put that waxy coating on them, and then you're gonna get fucking hydrophobic shit going on.
Well, and like also like I don't know, like these sorts of interactions and developments are like super complicated, and it's not as easy as like I'll just put random microbe XYZ consortia into the soil and then like do a bunch of drybacks, and then suddenly I'm gonna have, and then I'll package it up and sell it for a premium. It's a desert, resilient soil microbes. Like I don't know.
I think the idea between doing drybacks in soil is to kind of oxidize, and some of these elements have to be oxidized to be available. Some of them have to be reduced. And so I think the idea is to kind of stimulate some of the chemistry that's going on.
Oh, sure. But in this example, I've just come across people who they want to like create a consortia of microbes, and they wanted to have certain traits, but they're being a little bit simple about how those traits come about, I guess is what I'm saying. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of reasons you might want to do something like you're saying.
I would suggest to the people that you're talking to, Matthew, that bring that up, I would say do that in a compost pile. Don't do that with your plant growing in it. You can breed your fucking survivalists over there. Don't make your plant their survivalist too. And
Well,
then-
if someone's trying to create a consortium, I mean, the way to go about doing that properly would to look at their metabolism, to see what kind of, and then also to see if they can create endospores that are viable. And then you would also want to see what their metabolites are. What is the benefit of this microorganism? Because not every organism does the same thing. Some of them produce different compounds.
And then the crazy thing is when you get them together, sometimes they do something completely different.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Not only that, but some of them will just compete with each other. And so it's like if you're choosing something that feeds on the same exact source of energy, and you put them together, they have the same types of metabolism, they're going to compete for the resources. And so you want to try to create things that have synergies and not competition. You start putting a bunch of things in a bottle that are competing with each other, you're going to end up with one thing.
Bottle or in nature, really. But I totally agree with you. It's a really pernicious well, I guess I'll just say it is a pernicious perspective, because I think people just always think that like all the beneficials are going to be fine. There's not going to be any of this competition. Like, it's all okay. The people who selected these together, they definitely did the research and made sure that they work well together. And, I have no way of checking this anyway, so I'm just going to trust it. And I look forward to the developments in microbiology that allow people to actually take a look at these sorts of things in their own house for not that much money. I hope that it sort of has like a maybe biohackers are not the best example of this, but like that sort of perspective of like being able to actually know what you're dealing with at such a molecular level, and then you can make informed decisions, or you can even assess what the microbes are in your environment, maybe, and that'll give you some insight that you wouldn't be able to have otherwise. And I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it would be really neat to be able to have the ability to identify at home. And I don't mean this like with a microscope, but be like, hey, this is this family. And, maybe if there's a blockchain data where people have already done this and all the information's on a blockchain, they can compare species and say, oh, this is one that's not on the chain already. This is a new species that you found that's local to your area. Let's say it's like Bouveria bassiana, right? It's a ubiquitous microbe. And there's so many different species, we can't identify all of them, but eventually I think the technology will allow us to do that. And then we'll be able to see like, hey, this specific one. And that's what they do, is they find the best ones that'll be like, oh, this one has a specific target. It doesn't harm bees, it doesn't harm this, but it takes out lantern fly, or something like that. And so that those types of independent research that can be done really cost effectively, affordably, will be able to really advance the microbes without having to actually like create new ones in a lab. Because I think that's kind of going to, I could see how there could be benefits, but it could be a negative impact by creating something in a lab that's, a GMO microbe, like something that might have the ability to outcompete everything else, and that might have a negative impact on the whole ecosystem biosphere.
Yeah, like like I was saying last podcast at the very end, we're kind of, it seems like in some ways we're already there, even with the natural microbes that we've like taken and sort of influenced or cultured, and I guess in a way we've also already done that, not just in the last like 50 years, but also like human development and culture. There's microbes associated with us that with like the yeast and the fermentation space and that kind of a thing. And you better believe there's some horizontal gene transfer happening with like MRSA and staphylococcus and that kind of stuff. Even getting into there's a resistance to antibiotics genes basically that get into soil microbes even. And yeah, so it's very, very fascinating to see all this sort of jumping around. But yeah, if you're able to like be smart about it and like not allow that to happen, that's always better. And also you can get a situation where, like you mentioned with Bouveria bassiana, you could have like, there's many different isolates out there that exist, and you might find one that is, like you were saying, sort of more specific, and it could just be a matter of how that particular strain developed. But now that you know that and you're able to test that, you can put those traits in a database, and then if you track it with other tracking mechanisms, essentially, maybe like sequence the genome or PCR or something like that, and you can find, maybe even if you don't know the species, you can find that like, oh, well, I know that this these microbes make these compounds based on these genes that I know that we found, or something like that. So you can kind of know, like you were saying, like maybe it solubilizes phosphorus, or maybe it produces these compounds that I want, that might influence the plant's growth in a way that's desirable for me for an end product. Maybe it makes it grow longer or larger, or maybe it will toughen the epidermis or something, make it stouter, all kinds of stuff like that. But yeah, that's far into the future still.
That's the cutting edge of this shit.
Yep, everything is going to be all business, all logistics. It's all going to be blockchain. And the reason why is because AI can do all these like crazy analytics and just make everything run more sufficiently.
It's been really cool to see AI assisted predictions for like proteins, or like things that, or predicting things that might exist, and then we find that they actually do exist. And then this sort of computational model was able to sort of predict that, or predict the different combinations that are possible. That kind of stuff is really pretty fascinating to me.
I've been seeing it used to even
yeah.
model like insect when they're going to be ingressing on certain populations in certain cities based on prior data and things like that. Basically, just best estimates, and it's scary how accurate a lot of that stuff is, whether it's like weather or pest related. The
Yeah,
AI is
they
able
can't
to
predict the
direct us.
weather, Jack.
Well, I mean, if you look at the averages for the last 100 years or whatever, they
getting
can tell
better.
you. I'm not saying they're going to tell you what it's going to be tomorrow, but there's people that sell insurance to farms based on how much it's going to rain or how hot it's expected to be in a certain year. And like, I know where I'm
I wonder
from,
how
Farmers' been
accurate
pretty
that is,
accurate for
too.
hundreds of years, man.
the lake
I don't know. They
has
said Florida was going to be
cycles.
underwater in 1986.
Well, I don't know who they is in this case, but I'm talking about people that are literally billionaires off of what they've accomplished, and they're making more food produced in the United States than anywhere else in the world. So, I mean, we're definitely successful in our ability to apply science to improve our yields and outputs on things, and allowing ourselves the best. So, like, I'm not saying that they're going to be 100% accurate, but when they have an idea of, pests, for example, spring and summer in California, spider might start to come around at a certain time. And if you're just a cultivation who's barely scraping by, a pest invasion can literally wipe you out. So if you know, okay, this week or this month is the most likely time that we're going to start seeing pests, then you can start to preventatively spray a little more, or you can apply your predators in advance of doing that, as opposed to doing it all year long and draining yourself of resources. You can just use that sort of strategy, I guess, is one of the nice ways AI can be used, but it's not 100% accurate. I personally think that a lot of that stuff is really far. AI is like a buzzword to trick people out of their money. Oftentimes it's like, hey, we've got this AI system. And since people don't know what AI is or how it works, they can just throw the word AI on any new product and then try and sell it to people. And oftentimes the AI is not as cracked up as, or as good as it's cracked up to be, so to speak. So
it's like, I think even people or AI, not that I'm an expert either, but it seems like, the real difficulty with these sorts of systems that are fairly complex is that we don't do very good with emergent properties. So to oversimplify it, you plug in a bunch of variables or inputs and you can get a reasonable idea based on a context, but it assumes that you've like correctly articulated what that context is, right? So and even then there might be, it's like I was watching a Cornell video about, which I posted on Instagram, about photosensitivity in cannabis, among other things. And the individual mentioned like chemical promiscuity with like regards to the production of certain cannabinoids. And, like the fact that this is very common with a lot of volatiles, but like the cellular processes are not like perfect, right? So like Rubisco is an example of that, where like, it's not totally efficient, and ever so often it makes a very inefficient reaction during photosynthesis. But also with like terpenes and cannabinoids, there's precursor compounds that are made, and then those are affected over the span of metabolism. And sometimes it's just like probabilistic that like a hydrogen atom or something like, moves one way or another, and you might get one compound versus another compound. You might get a terpene that's very similar chemically, but not the exact same. And little things like that happen all the time, and can be the reason for some of the interesting like bouquets that we get for various plants and how they off gas those volatiles. So yeah, like sometimes it really is just a matter of, we don't know exactly. Like it could be 60% CBD, or it could be 40% this other compound or something like that.
Or like you were talking about earlier, like we think we're putting in all the inputs, but for a long time we thought that plants generally, not just cannabis, needed, let's call it 17 nutrients and micronutrients and things like that. And now we know that it needs more than that, and we're always finding out new things. So I think it's interesting that as good as science gets, there's always more that we can learn. And it's good to be humble and to keep searching for knowledge and do our best to use the current data to try and move it forward. And if and when we find out that it might not be the best, then to leave it behind. But Matthew, in regards to pot sizes, because that's what we talked about for the most of the first hour so far, is there any like IPM implications that you could think of or that come across your mind when maybe thinking about like smaller pots or larger pots or just different pot sizes that, or even types of pots that are used that maybe come to mind from your experience?
It's somewhat obvious, but the first thing that comes to my mind is that like you can get plants to get root bound sometimes, and that can obviously be a problem. One thing that I've multiple times had to explain to certain family members sometimes is that you shouldn't have like, this is goes for various plants, but you don't want a pot that will not drain. I think a lot of the people here already know that a lot of the times that's not very helpful. And sometimes it's okay, but oh, that was weird. So sometimes it's okay, but it really just depends on the context of how you're growing and that kind of a thing. But for IPM, you want to make sure that I'll say this, it's kind of adjacent to the pot, but like the quality of your water coming in is super important. Making sure that we were talking about failure points earlier. Brandon was mentioning, and you, Jack, also like the irrigation. And I have many fond and not so fond memories of assessing where on the irrigation line there's a clog or some other sort of breakdown in the system. Maybe there's a leak, maybe there's something else. And these can be fabulous ways for pathogens to get introduced or for an environment to become more suitable to them because maybe there's not enough water or too much water. And so when you're integrating your irrigation system with your pot system, you really want to make sure there is that synergy and that you're not, like other people were saying already before me, overwatering. Not only is it wasteful, which is always a shame, but also because it can very, very much be deleterious to your plant health. And if you do get a pathogen that's already there, maybe dormant, but then this sort of maybe low oxygen environment from all the water or something like that happens, or the roots get, what's the word I'm looking for? They become suffocated almost and start to putrefy. That becomes very easy to be exploited. And those problems become difficult very quickly. Anyone who has never dealt with Phytophthora, Pythium, and other sorts of microbes like that, it's very lethal very quickly. So it's very important. You can be fine 99% of the time, be almost done with your grow, have a really amazing plant, and you can have that problem happen. And then in a few days, your plant is dying and it's not fun.
That doesn't sound fun at all. And it's good to be aware of that. So I'm glad that you shared that with the growers because nobody wants to come back to dead plants. And if you can avoid it, always good too. One thing the Major General 420 Army said on a show recently was, I found this is kind of a just interesting anecdote. He was talking about growing outdoors and he was using rockwool cubes. And a lot of people felt that the need to cut the wrapping, the plastic wrapping off the rockwool cube when they transplanted it. Well, he said one harvest, like half the plants, his buddy cut all the plastic off of them. And he didn't cut the rockwool plastic off of his. And some animal came along and ate all the ones that his buddy cut the plastic off of, but the ones that were wrapped in the plastic survived. So I just thought that was kind of like a very, very interesting anecdote, but it's probably so niche and not going to affect too many people. And I'm not even going to like put it out there that it will save or protect your plants, but I just found that as like a unique or quirky little story that I do tend to believe because I don't think a lot of animals want to chew through or eat plastic, but they might be.
Oh, I believe it for sure.
To go through like a natural medium.
I can see like a foraging rodent or something just being like, you know what? I don't know if I want to do I don't want to do the work here. And then like right next to it or something, there's a plant that's not protected. And they're like, all right.
The easiest path, right? The path of least resistance, as some would say. Well, the second hour, we're not quite there yet, but I think that we've all kind of touched on pot sizes and a few other topics here. But one of the other topics that I feel like we haven't touched on in a while that a lot of people really like, I've even seen some people say this is my favorite topic ever. One suggested, and when we've talked about it in the past, is training, different types of plant training. So like topping LST, all that different stuff, and methods that we use, and then methods that are possible that maybe we don't use, and why we don't use them, but we could maybe see other people using them with success. So I'll pass it in reverse order this time, and I'll start with Kyle Breeder.
Training, yes. So I want to say I'm like a little unorthodox in regards to that. So I mean, I use a top here and there just to kind of not even for more heads, but mostly to just kind of like for timing and basically essentially it's a form of training if you want, I guess you could call it that, but just keep them shorter. But typically I'm just kind of looking for plants that do their own thing. Like I can't stand this is just me. Everyone's got their own stuff, but I can't stand plants that have like these whispery secondaries that you have to stake up or you have to trellis or else it's just all over the place and it's just all effed up. Like, and I have some really cool videos that I could share too, somehow, but, I just want them to do their own thing. And those are stuff that I kind of look for specifically. So I'm like, essentially, I guess I'm not into plant training, even though it's extremely vital in some scenarios. And especially in, maybe commercial settings, you definitely need it. But as a breeder, I'm just trying to give you the good, material. And then if you want to train from there to get to utilize the best out of that plant, then obviously that's what you're going to do as the grower. But that's just kind of where I'm at.
I'll say from the commercial standpoint, I think that you're actually not wrong to want to pick for the plants that need to have nothing done to them. Breeder Steve down in Columbia said he wants an upright, what he described as erect plant that grows by itself, strong enough to hold up its own structure. And, he doesn't want one that's going to flop over like you're talking about. And in a commercial environment, like not just like, no offense to any of the indoor cultivation settings that are going on right now, but even like the largest ones in 2 decades from now are going to be looked at in micro scale, because what they're going to be able to do outdoor, acres and acres and hectares of basically drill pressed cannabis and just planting it and letting it go. Versus that's like the true commercial. They're not going to have really much human interaction. They're going to be able to drive over with tractors and have commercial fertilizers doing all the stuff like they do with corn. So
you won't see that. You won't see that for anything other than things like distillate or for things that are going into like products. You'll never see mass cultivated outdoor for like, that's going to just be for general consumption.
But I mean, that's what most general stuff is. Most people are not. We are the very few percentage. We're the people that know the most about the flavors and stuff. Most people drink Bud Light. Most people drink Coors Light. They don't drink your local IPA or craft beer or most expensive $50,000 bottle of wine. They're going to go and get the, $2 chuck at Trader Joe's or whatever it is. So I think that whether it's smoked as flower, I know people that smoke hemp in red states, the smokable flower, and that stuff's grown outdoors. And they do extract it. I mean, Happy Buds hemp, I have some CBN and I'm smoking on, this is like live resin pen, but even in indoors, a lot of the stuff is being grown to be produced into distillates, isolates, terpenes, and different fractions. And some are live resin or whatever, but it's not as often as it used to be. I mean, for a long time, it was either just flour or hash and like very traditional basic hashes compared to the variety of textures and flavors and things that we have now. So I don't think that it'll disappear.
Typically, that's a byproduct of, so in commercial settings, what they'll do is they'll harvest all the best parts of the plant. They'll use things like lowers or, they sort out their different size buds. Some stuff goes to processing, some stuff. So when you're operating on like commercial scale, like the reason why they have that is because not all the plant is going to make it into flower. And so they want to be able to maximize the usage of that plant in the product. And so they create other product lines that don't necessarily have to be visually presentable. And then they turn those things into other products, edibles or tinctures or, hash infused products or whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm just seeing even here in the California market right now, the cheapest stuff per ounce or whatever. And a lot of people buy based on the dollar amount. And a lot of people are flower smokers still. And I know California is kind of a unique market in a sense, but I think that a lot of the world still like flower and a lot of them are going to shop for the cheapest stuff. So that means a lot of them are going to be smoking
cigarettes.
I think
Just like you said,
I think that
grow it outside. I'm not gonna have this cheapest shit. Roll it into fucking like a pack of cigarettes. Get a pack of cannabis cigarettes for like fucking $10 or something stupid.
Yeah, if we look at other smokable products like tobacco, and it's not the same thing. And I know people are gonna hate me equalizing the two, but because they're not the same thing. But if we just look at like if cannabis does actually become much more democratized globally, I actually agree with the concept, and I definitely have seen examples of it where a lot of the flower is being turned into concentrate. Sometimes it's for duplicitous reasons. Sometimes it's because they just really want to make sure it's a single source product. But regardless, there's going to be tons of people who will, like Spartan just said, want to buy like a pack of, you know, Maririllos for $2 or $5 or something. It's probably some exorbitant tax on it. Globally, like if we look at other parts of the world, I just think that like sometimes you just literally don't care or don't have access to the processing systems for whatever reason. It might not even be like a monetary reason, and people will still make use of it because it's simple to do that, just like home growers, right?
Let me jump in and say, if we do our jobs as a cheap home grow show, more people will be growing. I don't care how cheap it gets. Grow your own. It's going to be better than anything you could buy, most likely, even if it's top shelf. I mean, if you grow a plant and it's malnutrition, if you at least get some nutrition to it in flower and it goes to harvest full time, that shit is going to be good weed. It may not be the most, but it's going to be good if you do it right. And yeah, that's what I say. Grow your own. Don't even buy any.
Yeah,
Well,
don't pay the tax if you don't have to, right? Like, and you'll know
tax-free
where
weed tastes
how it
better.
was made. I agree.
I'll
I
say
agree with
this.
that.
I agree 100%. Everybody should if they can, but there is a population out there who cannot, and there's a population who
true.
will not just
Very
because
true.
they haven't listened to these shows. They don't know it's possible yet. They haven't been exposed to how affordable they can do it versus they're hooked on going to the shop, buying that few eighths a week or ounce a month, whatever it is. They've got their thing. And if you look at tobacco, like somebody had just mentioned, I think it was Matthew, they've used extracts from tobacco to literally lace like paper and smokable paper to give people the high or experience of the nicotine. So people are so hooked on the nicotine, they get addicted to a new product that's created. And I think that's unfortunately going to happen with cannabis, where some people criticize dabs for that, where it's like, I'm not going to get into that, but the idea is, I guess, technically, there's going to be the possibility where there's going to be someone growing a full field of hemp for flower, and then they take that flower, grind it up, and make pre-rolls with it, and then they spike it or lace it or whatever you want to say, supercharge it, enhance it, whatever they want to call it, infuse it is the term that they use in the legal markets now. But they're going to infuse that with the distillates, with the terpenes, with the other cannabinoid products that are being grown from the high THC or THCV or CBDV or whatever the minor cannabinoid of choice is for you. And then they're going to get that at bulk, and then they're going to pump that in just like they're doing with the pens now. They'll get distillate, and when they did 100% distillate, people didn't really like it. So they started going 95 distillate and like 5% terps. Now you're seeing like 90-10 and mixes of other things, not just terps, but flavonoids and minor cannabinoids as well. And I think that they're getting closer and closer to the mark, but there's going to be a huge market for like people like us. I think for at least the first few years that people are going to want the natural stuff, the stuff that, people grew themselves or grew under the sun or grew in a greenhouse, whatever it is, but just got the flower, can break it down, feel it, the sticky in their hand, just like they have for decades, So, but there's a lot of new kids coming up that have never had those experiences, who've never had seeded buds, for example. So there's entirely different perspectives that maybe none of us even can relate to anymore, because like some of these kids aren't growing up with like a $7,000 pound. It's like $1,000 pound if they're lucky. A lot of the stuff is way less than that. So the prices are just not even comparable to what many of us came up seeing routinely.
I'm also excited for
Not all that
non-smoking stuff. Oh, keep going.
Go ahead, Matthew.
I'll just say, yeah, just quickly. Also, there's more people nowadays. People, I would say, our generation and a bit the generation before us, and also, further generations from us. I feel like there is a general trend towards like we're certainly seeing in agricultural sectors where people are demanding like stuff that isn't poisonous.
Yeah,
Stuff where
health is wealth.
yeah,
Health is wealth.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
exactly. So there's definitely people
More
who are going
organic,
to have
less pesticide.
higher. I feel like there will be higher standards to a degree that we haven't seen. I mean, if I'm being very honest, that even predate my own existence, right? So
Do you think that you're maybe biased because we live in California where a lot of people go to farmers markets and care about organics, where like I'm from the Midwest where a lot of people eat McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts every day, don't really give a shit about
Hmm.
pesticides on their fruits, vegetables, or whatever they're going to buy. Again, just
Dude,
like the cheapest weed, they're going to go to Walmart, they're going to buy the cheapest produce, whether it's organic or conventional, they're getting the cheapest one and what's
I'm
available.
definitely biased because of all of the reasons that you said, absolutely, and some that
Oh.
you didn't say.
Well, I think
But
there's 2 points here.
Lack of education is a big problem though, because it's not that they don't
but
care. A
not
lot of
everyone
them,
will care. That's
let me tell.
this will save a lot of people a lot of heartache. Something I've had to learn a lot is that
Yeah.
just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean that people will care about it too.
and not only
Right.
that, but a lot of people don't give a shit because they're worried about, going to work and like
Other
making sure that
things.
their family's fed. They don't have time to worry about all these other things because they have other worries to worry about and take care
Yeah,
of.
but that's a problem with priorities. And let me say this: I went to visit California. As I'm walking through Oakland or San Francisco, everything is, organic this, organic that. What is it? Free range chicken, eggs for breakfast. All this. There is no signs like that in New York. There is none of that. You have to seek that shit out mostly. You know what? Nowadays, it's probably a lot more prevalent than like a couple of years back. But yeah, I was amazed at how much options of health you guys have there compared to where I'm at, just in general.
You almost have to
Oh,
choose to be
absolutely.
unhealthy here. We have all the fast food and stuff, but like I grew up in the Midwest eating mostly junky, shitty food. My family all did. I just grew up eating what they ate. And I came out here and I was like running track in college, and a lot of people around me were eating healthier, and there's just more healthy grocery stores, more farmers markets and things like that available. So I had the choice of more healthy options because it was available. But I can also relate to the people who like Tao in certain spots in New York. I know that there are spots like in more rural New York where you could probably find the farmers markets and the free range chicken eggs, but in New York City and certain areas like that, you're not going to run into that as much. And hopefully it's getting better, but it all really does show the difference of perspective. But I think a lot
I'm
of us
just
are coming at
saying,
it from a really high level.
Yeah,
And
Matthew is right,
let me
though.
characterize what I was saying because you're totally right about all of that, and I
In general,
might have
though.
made a major mistake in how I phrased this. I think that generally people will, or I've noticed that I think that if we look at maybe the last 100 years, we had access to things that were a lot better for us for reasons that we didn't even realize at the time, and also things that weren't so much for the same reason. But I think that there's a general trend of awareness, not necessarily that people always make the right choice, which is a different thing entirely. But I do think that there's more people who get incensed. People find out about things easier than they did before in various ways. And there are more, although they don't catch everything and they're not always optimized. There are various organizations and institutions that are there to sort of check and make sure that things don't get ridiculously toxic or poison in regards to things like salmonella outbreaks and other sorts of things like that. So I guess that infrastructure is there, but at the end of the day, just like with choosing to make the right decision, whatever that might be for your situation, it's kind of the same thing there where you might be more aware of it. And I think there's more attention in that way. So I feel like generally people are not going to accept certain things that people didn't accept before, but that's not going to be everyone. Absolutely not.
And we're going to have a market that is going to be everywhere. It's going to have at least testing to where the stuff isn't harmful, right? So even if there is we'll call it low quality product or mass produced product or whatever you want to call this product that we're talking about that is grown outside and then altered, we'll say infused, I guess that's the word we're using, infused with outside terpenes. There's still a place for it, and I'm fine with that because even though I live in a bubble and I consider myself a connoisseur of weed, I know that there's tolerance involved. So I don't care who you are, you're only going to get away with smoking the cheapest of the cheap weed for so long before that weed doesn't do it for you anymore, and you're going to have to upgrade. And eventually those people, if they continue to consume, are going to be at the same level that I am and are going to be wanting, it's pointless. It's definitely a waste of money, even though it's cheaper. It's a complete waste of money for me to buy
Yeah.
that because I'll consume it all and not feel a thing.
And not enjoy it. That's what
Exactly.
happens. Once you get the good stuff, you don't want to go back to the, like, when I was coming up, once you had the real good, the like homegrown that was good, like indoor grown, you didn't want to go buy regs ever again. And then you're on a quest. That was it. You only wanted the good shit. And that's what's going to happen as these people come up, I'm sure.
And there's always going to be a vast majority that wants the cheapest thing there. That's all. They're looking at price and nothing else, and that's fine.
And that might work for
That's
them.
fucking people's jobs. You're keeping people working.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Regardless of what your price point is, everybody wants to smoke good weed. Nobody is ever like, let's go smoke mids. Like,
disagree.
Like,
I'm so
Some
sorry.
people don't know
to
what
say
mids
this.
is.
I'm so sorry to say this, Brandon. I wish you were right. But it's not true.
No,
and I've literally experienced it, and it's unfortunate. People get attached to what they're used to, and it pains me.
People have asked me if I had anything weaker because, it was too much. So that's a thing, maybe.
I was going to say that too, Tao, because I know a few ladies on my street who they only smoke once a day at the most, maybe once a week. And they take like a puff of a joint. A joint will last them a whole week. They'll take a puff of it, put it out, and pass the fuck out. And that's their whole smoking for the day. Their tolerance doesn't skyrocket because they're not waking, baking, and smoking all day.
Right.
It's a different situation, I guess, for everybody. And like Matthew was kind of alluding to, some people, they smoke mids not even knowing it's mids, and that's their favorite shit because it's all
they think it's great.
And they think it's great, and they get attached to the taste, the flavor, the brand, and everything, and becomes
the headaches,
psychological. You are right. It's I'm saying this exuberantly because like I'm replaying it as we talk about this in my head. I have a memory of exactly what we're talking about here, and it's just it's just shocking. But I guess it's just like what you were saying about like Coors Light, right? Like, or the Claw, right?
They want to drink like 12 Coors Lights, not like 2 10% IPAs. And like my one buddy, and he sold at his college, and he actually bought the shittier stuff because the community he sold to like to smoke blunts, and they're not going to pay 60 an eighth to roll up a blunt and smoke in 2 seconds. They wanted to smoke 8 blunts, so they wanted to throw $20 and get a shit ton of Reggie, and they didn't care if it was seeded. They'd fucking pick through the seeds and roll it up and smoke on it all night long. And if it barely got them high, who gave a shit? They just wanted to fucking toke on it. The tobacco was probably getting them as high as the fucking weed was, but it really does. It's certain markets.
Like, man, the ritual is as important, right? Like, I guess that's what I want to really convey here. You're totally right, Brandon.
There are people out there right now that are old enough to smoke weed that will never have to know the pains of what I had to go through to get a nickel bag of dirt brown Mexican bud. Okay. And I'll tell you what, I made many trips to the park to see the one-legged Mexican on the bicycle because he always had the weed, and it was always terrible, but we were always stoked. It was always a mission. Sometimes he wasn't around. We'd have to go find somebody's older brother or somebody's older brother's friend. And it was, dude, we would literally go on like missions, and they would take hours. It was literally just to go find a 20 sack of weed or a fucking half ounce, and it was like.
Dude, that's how it is in other states still. When I was in Florida before they got all their medical shit going on, I was driving 30 minutes at the minimum to meet up with my plug, and other times 45 minutes to an hour both ways to go just to score a sack of what I would consider like a 5 out of 10 at the best, on the best day, maybe a 6 out of 10 if they got some fire, but like it was a 5 out of 10 if I'm being generous. So it definitely shows like the access and locations really matter. And
like people still go to restaurants, not to cut you off, but like, people still go to certain restaurants that are like, I don't know, like out of nostalgia. Like, I would be lying if there were food, like what you were saying, Jack. I've grown up, when I was a child, I had half days in elementary school, and my mother would take me to some restaurant on the half days, sometimes for lunch or whatever. And like, you just develop memories about certain places. And as you grow older, those memories might still be very potent. For me, a lot of those have sort of changed over time, but it's kind of what I'm trying to articulate here. Like there are people who will just, like you just said about like, having like want to blow through 20 blunts instead of 2 really good ones. I have, do you remember the high desert people I told you about? They, a friend of mine who I've known for a very long time, one time I bought his mother cigarettes as a gift because she likes to smoke, and I got her some really nice ones. And this stays with me forever. She exchanged them to get the lower quality ones
she
for more
had.
of them.
Oh.
It was amazing, and I'll never forget that moment. But so that's definitely happened.
People like what they like, and you cannot account for
Yeah.
taste. That is a crazy
Exactly.
thing.
You cannot account for taste. People say that in a like it's a insult, but it's actually very true.
It's just the reality. Everyone's palate is different, so people are gonna like different shit. It tastes different to them. 10 people smoke the
Yeah.
same herb. If they had to write it down privately on a piece of paper and then submit it, I guarantee you, all 10 of them are gonna have different results. You might have like an overlap, like 5 said citrus, but one might have said lemon, one might have said lime, one might say feet, one might say gas. Like, I've seen this at parties. Like, pass it around, everybody smokes it, takes a hit, and then you whisper in somebody's ear what they think it smells like, and then if nobody says it out loud, where like other people can be influenced by
That's
their
very
thought.
influencing if you just
I'm
shout it
super
out.
picky. I won't even smoke it if it doesn't taste good. If it don't taste good, I won't hit. I'll hit it once to try it. If it doesn't taste good, I'll be like, nope, sorry.
That's a good place to be, man. I love that we're in a world where, like, you went from earlier saying you would go see the Mexican dude with one leg on the bicycle and hope he was there just to get a shitty pack of brown. But now you're like, this doesn't even taste that good. Like, I'm not gonna keep smoking this shit anymore. Like, how far we've come.
But
Yeah.
those days, Brandon, that was like common experiences. It's like, it was like
I mean, it wasn't
it's like
just one
everybody,
of us that was going on these missions. It was like
we
we
did the same
collectively
thing.
pitched in
Yeah.
because we were broke ass kids
Yeah,
with no
that was the other
jobs.
thing.
And it's like, I got five. 4 of us have fucking $20. Okay, we
All
can
we
get
need is
fucking
dirt,
high
yeah.
today.
Dude, I never pulled the I guess I realized later in life that I was the fucking idiot that, everybody's throwing in 20, and then the one guy who went to get it wasn't throwing in shit. So he was just like smoking for free because he had the connection or whatever. And
Yep.
yeah, it was funny. I didn't realize that until later in life that I was always paying my full, amount, and some people were taking advantage, I guess. But
Oh yeah.
you learn, live and learn.
Or you have to pass your money off to, because you can't go up. That's like, it's got so secretive and shit, and be like, and then you get a fucking pinched bag, and homeboy went up there, sat up there for fucking 15 minutes taking bong hits off of the weed that you just fucking bought, and then you fucking get a short bag at the end of the day. I remember the good old
Some
days,
people
man.
don't
It
know.
was different. It was just so much different.
Dude, I got a bag of shake one time. Like, it was a quick, like, it dropped the bag in my lap and like handed him the cash. And by the time he got back to his car and like, was pulling off, I look at my fucking bag and it's just like a balled up piece. It looks like a ball, but it's just a shake in the bottom of a bag. It was like supposed to be an eighth, and it ended up being like 3 grams. So thankfully,
Dude, I was getting starter kits, just some dirt weed and seeds. Basically that's what it was good for. I should have planted that shit instead of smoked it.
Yeah, we were already talking about Mexican weed.
a lot of people actually grew it out and then found like different shit because it had, when you smoked it fresh, it was actually pretty good. But when you got it as a brick and it traveled, however it traveled and got hot and nasty.
I grew a
Inside
lot
the
of
brick,
Mexican.
though. Sometimes
I grew a lot of
inside.
Mexican weed out. That shit ain't that good. It wasn't
Not
wasn't
compared
good.
to today's stuff, for sure.
It wasn't even good compared to the stuff that we were growing, like, just the regular, like, stuff, sour diesel and cushes and stuff like that. All that, it was weird though, because you would think that those Mexican varieties would have been sativa, and they never were. They were always broadleaf, dominant, short, stocky varieties.
So-
On that note, though, I'm actually very excited to see like Central and Southern America like become more like open to the possibility of it on like on the legal side, and I think there could be some really great stuff coming out of that area. To be honest, great,
Colombia-
magnificent horticulturalists out there, agriculturalists. So I'm curious
Oh,
to
they're
see
already
that
setting up for it.
blossom
They're already
more.
setting up for it. They're getting
Yeah, it'll be
Yeah.
the market there will be a lot lower price point. So product will have to be grown mainly like you were talking about, right?
Yep.
For
They're talking in
markets like
hectares.
that, to where like you can mass produce and then and have a really low price point. I'm working with some people down in
Breeder Steve's been talking about this for a long time. He has hectares down there in like 6 different geological zones, and he has a whole team of agronomists who they measure it by the
That's
centimeter
right.
per
You
day.
mentioned
And
that.
they have the number of like leaves, the number of like tips on the leaves. They are taking account of all this interesting stuff, but then they grow out all these different varieties. And he has these giant aquaponic setups with like, I don't know if it's like a crocodile, but like a similar animal. It's not a crocodile or an alligator, but something like that in his aquaponic setup.
You know, I wonder if what we call Mexican brickweed might have not have originated in Mexico even, but it might have came up through the southern border.
I can tell you that
I know there's
Absolutely.
farms of marijuana in Mexico.
Dutch,
but you know what I'm saying?
they all had heavy Dutch influence because they were hybridized, I think, in like the 80s or something like that.
Well, here's the other thing.
80s.
A lot of it was being bricked here in the US. Go watch the movie Acapulco Gold on YouTube from the 70s. And there was dudes that were bricking their weed here in the US and then distributing it, whether it was in Kentucky or throughout the Midwest. There was a whole bunch of different people doing it. And they had these giant press machines. I'm like surprised none of them got any like rosin out of that shit. But you can definitely look, and people were doing it here. They were growing it. They didn't even know. Some of them didn't even get to flower. They'd cut the leaves off and they were bricking the leaf, just straight up leaf, a bunch of leaf. Like they were so ignorant, I guess, in certain respects back then, that a lot of them didn't even know like about photoperiodism and getting the plants to flip to flower.
And that's why all the numbers from the DEA are saying that the weed is so much stronger now than before.
Yeah,
they
skewed
went off
by
of that shit.
Oh yeah, and the product that they use, the populations that they have to use for research are not representative, to say the least.
Well, and the other thing I was gonna say about Colombia was like Breeder Steve is one of those people that's talking about growing it commercially and being able to sell like basically untrimmed, like baby arm style, like corn cob buds for like 10 cents on the dollar, like because he's gonna be growing it at such mass with such minimal, they're just gonna harvest the plant, dry it, and then sell it to you. And they're not gonna do a bunch of manicuring and this stuff, but some of the stuff is gonna be ground up for, distillate or pre-rolls and things like that. But he ultimately, when the legality, because like at first they allowed it to be legal, but you could only export like mass, and I think it had to be shredded. He couldn't even sell any pure flour. It had to be run through a giant shredder. But Colombia is one of the countries that allows export currently. I know Canada exports currently. They export a lot of their best stuff actually goes to Germany. So most of the Canadian market doesn't even get to see a lot of the best medicine that's grown in their country. It's being exported.
Israel imports a big amount too. They're a big customer to a lot of the world.
Huge research center. So they're trying to get all the different varieties from all over the world to see how the profiles are and how they're effective for different medicines and things like that. But I guess we only really touched on, I think, 2 people's training. Brandon and Kyle talked a little bit about training, and we meandered onto some other subjects there. So I guess I'll pass it to Spartan Grown, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you like to train the plant.
Man, I don't really do a whole lot. The only time I train is if I let the plant grow. But like I said earlier, I alluded to earlier, I guess, my goal on my plants here is to fill a 2x2 canopy. So I'm training the plant into a 2x2 canopy. So I usually will do that with either topping, or if it's shot up on me or something, I might do a hard, stressful pull that whole branch down and pinch it to make sure it stays down, or maybe just low stress train it. It all is very, very situational. So I do all of those things, but I try to do very little. If the plant's going to grow the way I want it to grow, just straight up and fill that 2x2 block and just grow straight up, that's perfect. I'll just love it, let it be. Once I put that first net down, it'll be very, very little adjusting and I'll be good to go. But otherwise I'm bending branches or whatever I have to do to fill that. I'm just trying to fill that 2x2 spot, so I can plug them all in together, and they're interchangeable, and that way they can be mobile, and it makes my life easy.
You make it almost like a little like 2x2 hedge on what I've seen in your
Yep.
space to fill out the whole entire footprint of your 4x4. And it's smart. I wanted to say one of the things, I don't know if you just mentioned it or not, but I saw his name in the chat is Grandmaster level. And people call it the GML topping or Grandmaster level topping, where people will take off like the top two leaves that kind of like if my head is the new growth and these leaves on the side were like the leaves that are supporting that shoot, they would, instead of topping it, remove this leaf and that leaf. And that basically stunts this growth a little bit. So the other growth
Yeah, I
catches
do
up to
that.
it.
I do that a lot in veg or even early flower. I'll still do that week 1, week 2. And it does help to slow those, especially week 1, week 2, when you're trying to manipulate and really build that final shape. I find that when you do that, it really does slow those tops down, and it really helps do that with minimal stress to the plant. Really, I really do like that technique.
I like that method to widen out the plant and just push it up a bit.
Right.
Um,
That's usually what I'm
SoCal,
having to do is make it. I'm kind. If I do train, I'm usually trading out. I'm usually trying to get it to bush out more.
and I find that can be more effective than like trying to LST and like bend it down and pull it out. Where if instead of doing that, you just let this top stay where it's at, deleaf it, and then let the other ones kind of grow up and out to catch it, and it makes more of that candelabra style look to it, as opposed
Yeah.
to like curving the top down. You're allowing the bottoms to grow up and make it even. So shout out to Grandmaster level. I also wanted to shout out SoCal Weed Nerd, who he has a strain called Mendo Loco that gets really tall. And he was growing a plant next to a fence, kind of like how Spartan's got. And he didn't want to get too tall. So he kept on doing like the GML top. So I don't really know any other way to what that term is actually called. But he kept doing that over and over and over again. And instead of this plant like stretching like it normally does and getting super tall, it just became like a giant hedge, like a super wide bush, and just like grew across like he said it was like 3 feet tall, but like 7 feet wide. So it's pretty badass that you can really manipulate the cannabis plant like that. There was even a product, I can't remember the name, but there was a little like plastic ring it would grow up into, and then there was like a mosquito net, and it grew into this ring, and it was on a metal rail, and it would slide across, and basically it would fill out the entire net with growth behind the top shoot, and it was
Remember-
basically designed for like stacking them. But I don't know, it was overly complicated. I guess I could probably find it on my
I
Instagram
haven't
somewhere.
seen that. Did you
Yeah,
ever
it's
use
pretty
that?
cool. I've never used one, but I think they're like several $1,000s.
Oh Jesus. Yeah, I would not be interested.
Yeah, no. It's definitely an interesting method, and it's a set it and forget it for like a commercial space. I think they're kind of trying to get like racked style where you have like, especially for plant count, limited places. It would slow your veg a lot, but once you get it kind of dialed in and you get that first cycle into flower, you're basically just flipping kind of regularly and replacing those blocks. But I'm not a huge
Yeah,
fan of
but
the
you can
automation.
As I say, you can kind of just do that manually. Fuck it, for thousands of dollars. Yeah, I'm trying to pull up on my phone right now. I forgot I got a question sent to me, and they wanted everybody's opinion. I can vaguely remember the. I wanted to get the actual quote from them. I don't remember exactly which one, but the gist of the question was oh, here we go. Okay, this is from Hambone Grown on Instagram. It says, I wanted to ask to bring up questions to address. Let me get to it. The issue of being able to maintain microbes in the rhizosphere in outdoor gardens. He goes, I'm thinking primarily vegetables and even new landscaping and such. I recently learned enough about microbes and no-till organic growing and nurturing the rhizosphere to want to apply that to outdoors. And I've been using an appropriate filter to knock out chlorine and chloramine in my city water successfully for my indoor garden. I quickly learned that I can't be filtering all that shit and bringing it up from the basement to water my stuff outdoors. What do y'all do? Do you know of a good outdoor high flow hose filter? Do you use reservoirs and whatever citrus chemical that's supposed to neutralize shit and water for those? Thanks. So my short answer is for my outdoor and even my vegetables and everything, I'm just using my straight city water, not unfiltered, because I've built up a lot of, this is my belief, I don't have proof, but I've built up a ton of organic material, so it's got a ton of bacteria and fungi going in there already. So the amount of chlorine that's coming in there might be whacking some of them, but I got so much going on that it's fine. You know what I mean? It's not affecting them in any way that I've seen negatively, not anyway yet. So I just don't worry about it. And plus, I'm spraying through the air, so I'm off gassing some of the chlorine, and I don't have chloramine in my water. So that's I guess
think that's important to mention.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think a big misconception is that like what Brandon always says, I think is very valid here, is that like if you're not testing, you're guessing, right? Not just him, but many people.
Yeah.
Even I already mentioned that, but also the sort of idea that like if you apply, because I get asked this question a lot in IPM, like I'm trying to use certain microbes, like if I use this chemical, or if I water in this certain way, am I going to negatively affect them? And the answer to that is possibly, but like sometimes you'll hear that a compound is antimicrobial, but like that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't tell you anything meaningful. What microbes is it anti?
And it's like, how much of that substance does it take to decimate biology? I mean,
The whole population. Yeah, exactly. Right. That's the other thing.
They're most likely not putting that much. If you're really concerned about it, you could fill up barrels, you can oxygenate them and put some fulvic acid in there.
Yeah. Or humic even, but fulvic would be better.
Humic fulvic acid.
Yeah, and there's probably going to be microbes there already. But again, that's also sort of a totally specious statement without like some sort of context. But I think you could be reasonably sure that there's probably going to be some level of like microbes in the bulk soil. But it truly is, many studies I've even shared in presentations, like there's a lot of research that shows that like the rhizosphere is super important. So like that small, few millimeters from the root plane to the soil that like makes contact with practically directly, that space is significantly different from the space that's a few centimeters out, and that space is significantly different from the microbes past that. So in a lot of ways, through various means, those microbes get to the location through chemotaxis and actual literal movement and like following like the scent essentially, or the taste rather, if you want to put it that way, of like certain compounds that they associate with plant life that they want to be attracted to or possibly not be around. And there's all kinds of stuff like that. So without bogarting the conversation, I just want to say that it is super complex, but they're a lot more, in a lot of ways, they're more resilient than you think. And certainly, even if you kill some, unless you're in just like a barren location, it's pretty likely that populations can recover. If they weren't able to do that, we would be in an even worse situation than we are already.
I wanted to give a shout out to the person who made that technology I was talking about earlier. Their name is Aya from Trella Technologies or Trella Tech. This is one of their plants. It grows about a 6-foot wide single cannabis plant by using this little device you can see in the background. I'm going to click back to their page and just kind of show it off a little bit because I did mention it. I want people to kind of have an idea of what I was talking about.
I remember this thing.
Yeah, I personally, I don't think it's the greatest.
They had a time-lapse video where you could see the thing actually grow as it stretches the plant out to train it.
I was trying to find that. This is like a demonstration, but this is like for tomatoes or something, but it gives you the idea. I'll keep scrolling down the page and you'll be able to eventually see the cannabis actually being grown in it.
The thing is how wide?
6 feet.
6 feet. Wow. Okay. 6x3, 6x4, maybe.
I'm not sure, but this is kind of like what I was talking about, where they're trying to make it into like a vertical gardening strategy.
Yeah. That's pretty sharp. I like that. Fits on those metal racks. Don't look very sturdy.
I hate to be the guy that has to do the work on those ladders, bending over and trying to prune leaves and stuff on it.
Me too, man.
Second, third tier thing, man.
I'm hating that trend. I'm hating the 2-tier, 3-tier trend.
I mean,
it's not something
about inefficient.
Yeah, I mean, even in like Gerber like in like Netherlands, like they have like they raise the bed so that you don't have to like bend all the way over and break your back, so like a little bit of perspective. So what's the purported benefit?
I
It
would
was just so that way you
Limits
could
plant
get
count
something.
and waste is what they're
plant count is
advertising.
huge, yeah.
Like if you had limited plant count, you could essentially have these things. It'll stretch your plant out into a larger space. It'll basically auto train it for. There it is.
Here's the thing. So right now, the left side,
Oh.
what you're seeing is like a mosquito netting, and that's being
Yeah.
filled up with all the vegetation that's being blocked, but airflow is still allowed to go through. The light's hitting the basically
What's-
apical tip, and it
What's
grows
that
it.
thing that keeps sliding back and forth really fast?
It's very interesting
Those are
to
fans.
see.
Those are fans
Oh, okay, cool.
blowing underneath the canopy.
And that's just the tops at the very right.
Yes.
Nice.
I mean, my
Is
first
this automated by an eye, like
This is
something like a
automated.
laser eye or something?
It's just videotaped. It's auto fed, auto air, auto light. Everything is set up to be set it and forget it.
So does that continue all the way through bolting, or are we talking that you just do that in veg and then?
Once I think you get to flower, I think the fans keep running, but you rip the top net off and then it just flowers through, and you are supposed to put up a trellis, I guess.
Straight up from there, okay.
My initial like hot take is that I would be very concerned with the leaves touching so much, all that like physical sort of intimacy. Like if you don't get good airflow, man, like if
Yeah.
if you just happen to get one of those really dank plants, which is probably what you want,
Yeah, do
I
some
don't
leaf
know.
stripping.
I'd be curious. But it
Yeah,
looks really
It
cool to
gives,
see.
it gives a lot of spaces for pathogens to take a foothold with all those little microclimates
And
where
move
leaves
quickly,
collapse.
you know. Yeah. I
You
agree
know,
with you.
sometimes complete robotic automation isn't necessarily the best course of action, because when you take the human component out of it, it
I would
becomes
say not sometimes.
soulless. You know,
I think that's
Yeah,
a little
more
bit
times
poetic.
than not.
Ooh, tell me how you really feel. I mean, like, I think it's important to not, there's tons of automatic things that I know all of you count on. But I would say that, yeah, like when it comes to like really fine tune movements around the plant, there's a reason why like it takes quite a bit of engineering to like make something that's like simple enough to be okay and economic enough to be viable, but
Right.
yet like you don't have people like you don't have like a machine that goes up and like cuts all the like walnuts or other nuts like on a nut tree. Like you shake it, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
this is this kind of automation that I would be scared to trust, because no matter how sophisticated it was, if it broke down and you didn't have if you didn't have a primary human element or something else caring for it, yeah, it's like,
well, I saw something like that the other day where it was a drone fleet that was picking fruit off of fruit trees.
I think I saw something like that a little while ago. That is kind of cool.
I saw that too. It's crazy. It
I was like, that is, they are moving slow. I was like, that's not like, you could literally like
I
one
feel like
dude
you'd have
could
to
do.
Give it time. They'll catch up, Brandon.
you'll have to prune it correctly, I feel like, so you could like get in there, you know.
And give it time. They'll be picking walnuts with drones too, I bet.
How are they gonna get into like what Matthew's kind of alluding to? How are you gonna get in there without fucking your blades up?
Maybe it's
You
a
gotta-
crawler.
You gotta, one of those, the old people that need the stretchy thing that they could grab stuff with. Just put that on the end
The
of the
little
drone.
picture
Yeah.
I like it.
I think some stuff is actually the old school stuff is very effective, and the further we
Agreed.
move away from it, the less efficient we get. We end up spending all this time, money, energy implementing some of the stuff, and then you find out that thing that just grabbed the tree and shook it was more effective than having 10 drones fly around with a picker and snapping them
Right.
off one by one or
No,
whatever it
sure.
is.
I don't know how good it is for the tree.
So you don't like any automation, Tao? I'm not trying to attack you. or
No,
anything.
I'm just half joking, but I do believe that the human interaction with the plant is a must for like Brandon was saying, it's soulless. You can't have soulless stuff.
I think
There's
there's
a
sort of a
quote.
spirit to this plant, if any. I mean, probably all plants have, and humans or whatever, if you have any sort of religious or spiritual thoughts about you. But I think that most people would say if you walked into like a 10 light grow and looked at the quality and saw how many plants there were and how many gardeners there were and how much time the gardener has with each plant versus a guy who has 100 light grow versus the guy who has 1,000 light grow versus the guy who has a 10,000 light grow. The amount of time and attention to detail that can go into each individual plant, the amount of like quote unquote love that can go into it, or just basically maintaining all the proper parameters or whatever they have felt are the best parameters for that plant to make it perform how they want to.
Yeah, it's like
an art.
school.
There's like,
The
I think that's why
teachers-
we're going to keep having local people. Like every single state is going to have their people that are killing it in that state. You're, like these MSO multi-state operators, they will have some success. They have a big brand and a big name and people will buy their stuff. They're going to go state to state and set up. But I think that the top notch stuff is going to be old heads, OGs, people that just really know what they're doing and love what they're doing, that really put all the passion and time into the plant, that know all these strains and genetics that you're never even going to see on the commercial market, but they've been either breeding it themselves or growing it for years and have something special really picked out that's unique and different from the market.
Some of the best I've ever had has been from some of the most careful, and I would say that you guys would describe them in the way that you're talking about, sort of soulful. And I'll just shout out Moonmade Farms, who I visited several years ago, and it's still one of my favorite people I've worked with. Great people trying to do good things, and are mindful about waste, and also treat the plant with a sort of a spiritual regard. And I think that there is something to that for sure. Certainly I can't knock it if I'm being truthful, but I don't know if automation's too bad. You have to be careful with how you do it.
You made me think about something. They go by schools. They say if a teacher's got 10 students, that's one thing. If a teacher is better, a teacher with 10 students performs better than a teacher with 100 students. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it too.
People want as close to 1-to-1 as possible. The closer you get to 1-to-1, the better.
It's better, right? Is it proven to be better, or is it just
no? It's statistically proven. That is statistically proven.
So
it's why it's really important.
Yes.
Why do you think private schools have such small class sizes?
That's
it's like
why I'll
5
never
to
have
8
a
kids in a
problem
class.
undoing my material to people for their monies, because
private learning is the best, because somebody that has exponentially more experience with the subject can impart way more wisdom on the subject than just a textbook could.
Absolutely.
When a lot of public schools are forced by curriculum of a state to teach to a curriculum that they say you have to learn X, Y, and Z for the test. This is going to be on the test. This is in the textbook.
Judged by the test. Yeah.
Yeah. Spartan, your mic is a little quiet. I don't know if you can turn up the gain or
all the way up now.
Oh, okay, cool.
It's as high as it goes.
Okay, cool. We just got a couple comments in the few episodes in the past few weeks that are saying Spartan's a little quiet. And I want people to be able to hear the good Spartan grown information.
Yeah, it was down a little bit and I did turn it up, but it's all the way up as high as it goes now.
All right. Appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, I definitely agree. People don't take the time to consider the importance of education, and even like what we were kind of saying already, like sort of doctrinal. Like I often criticized that we didn't learn certain subjects, or even like, when I had my small stint with the military school, like you wouldn't learn certain things that I think would be pretty important to know. And I feel like it's almost because it was more about hyping you up for a certain kind of future rather than like actually educating you as like a leader, which I always came across as like hollow.
Right.
And it's harder to do that when you have 100 or 200 students, right? Absolutely. How can you individually assess and help people out? It's a struggle. And then on top of that, at a higher level education, there are definitely a lot of people who they get positions as researchers where they have to teach, and they are not interested in teaching, but they are interested in doing the research. So, yeah.
Or interested in the tenure and collecting that good paycheck. But I will say education and like people's resources, kind of going all the way back to the beginning when we were talking about what makes people buy or not buy something. Like, is everyone going to buy that $60 plus eighth? Probably not. A lot of them are going to buy the cheapest stuff because going back to the resources is what they can afford. But then on the other end, the two big things, I think it's what they can afford and it's what they know. The education is so key. All of us, or most of us, know what terpenes are, and we might even know which ones we like and what to look for, what strains might have them in there. But most people don't even, in the general cannabis consuming market, don't even know what terpenes are. I've worked at delivery services. My wife's worked currently at one, and we've worked at dispensaries and things like that. Most people come in and they want the highest THC and the cheapest stuff. What's your cheapest pre-roll? What's your cheapest ounce? What's your cheapest eighth? And then there's the people that are like, what's your strongest? What's your strongest indica? What's your strongest sativa? But education is really important, and I think that part of what we do on this show is, letting people know all of the nitty gritty and intricate details that exist in cannabis, so that they can further educate themselves. Listening to the show, but even afterward, if you don't even know what to look up, it's hard to Google. What terpene should I consume if you didn't even know that terpenes are out there? So it's a sometimes slow and tedious process to get the information to the people, but once they have it, I think it can really help people start to enjoy some of the more top tier, high end cannabis that maybe they wouldn't have even thought about trying before. And like Spartan said, maybe their tolerance will get higher if they do become a more regular user and find, oh, like I've got knee pain. Instead of taking Tylenol or Advil, maybe I'll take this, salve and rub it on my knee. And maybe I'll take some CBD and mix that with the THC. So I'm not feeling stoned. I can still go work, but I'm getting pain relief. Like there's a lot of little nuance that I think can really help the end user and make people more able to introduce cannabis into their day-to-day life. So I'm just happy that we're able to do that. One of the things I wanted to mention was a listener reached out and told me that I believe it was Castbox stopped having all the old episodes. So if you can, I'll go pull it up right now on my phone. The new one, oh no, Castbox is the new one that has all the old episodes. It used to be Stitcher. Stitcher had, like, if you wanted to listen to like the Josie Wales episode, or like the first episode Jack Greenstock was ever on, or the first episode of Growing with My Fellow Growers, or even like Spartan's first show or Tao's first show, you can go back and listen to all those on Castbox. So anybody out there who enjoys this content, if you want to look back to some of the older episodes that aren't on YouTube and aren't on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all the other main podcast platforms, you have to go and check out Castbox. It's a free to download app. I'm not like plugged or associated with them. It's just a cool way that we can get access to a lot of our deleted information. But I think with that said, we're coming up to about the 5:45 hour here on the West Coast. And this is typically when I give Spartan a chance to give his final thoughts and shout outs before he has to refill the tray and take care of the dogs before Michigan Bro Grow Show.
I got to do a podcast too. So after he's done, I'll sign out.
Sweet. What podcast you doing?
I'm doing a live with Slim and on my other new business partner. We have a new facility out here.
Oh, sweet.
It's getting built out right now.
All right, well, I got to go, guys. So thanks for the show. It was awesome hanging and talking shop as usual. And shout out to chat, man. It was awesome seeing you guys today and talking with you. And hopefully the show hit you in the right spot today. I thought it was a pretty good episode. I really liked it. It covered a lot. It was pretty wide ranging, so it's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm gonna go to the bathroom myself and then let the dogs go out. They're gonna have to wait because I can't. Anyways, Growers Loves, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Have a great one, Spartan. Thanks as always for joining
Peace out,
us.
Spartan.
All right. Well, I'll go next. It's always good to be here. I've been pretty busy. I got a lot of stuff going on. Had a conversation with Felipe, who's part owner of Compound Genetics and Node Lab. We're going to get some stuff going on. I just finished the premiere season finale podcast over at the FOS headquarters in Las Vegas. I got a bunch of crazy shit going on. And my journey over at rust.brandon on IG if you want to get microbes, humate fertilizers, amendments, things for our IPM. You can head to bokashiearthworks.com, and I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks again for joining us, Brandon. Always a pleasure.
Brandon.
Have a good one, Brandon. Peace out.
Later, guys.
I do want to let the chat know next week because the last few shows have had like a theme, or at least we started with a theme. I think we did the pot sizing pretty well, and then we kind of just spun off. And we did talk a little bit about plant training, but it became more of a open dialogue. Next week, I do want to do a chat Q&A. So make sure if you have questions, grow related or just cannabis related in general, that you want to hear from anyone on the panel, to get those questions ready for next week, because we'll be answering those and potentially even bringing a few of you up on to the panel to chat with us for a bit and show off your garden if you would like to do that. And I think I saw Kyle unmute there for a second. So Kyle, did you want to jump in?
Well, I mean, I guess if you really want to know what happened, I said all kinds of goodbyes to everybody, and the whole time I was muted.
Ah, shit.
It happens.
Uh, well, well, to be honest, I kind of got to go too. I got a lot of things to situate, but 'cause I'm on the East Coast. I don't know if everybody knows that already, but not at least the listeners. But yeah, I'm excited for next week. I love Q&As, man. It kind of gives everybody a chance to kind of get some questions off their chest, because sometimes people get not so good answers and maybe even some false answers because the internet doesn't have everything. So but yeah, so Kyle Breeder, I typically specialize in feminized breeding. I do actually have some 1980s skunk and Northern Lights that I'm kind of doing an open pollination on right now. And my lord, the terpene profiles are so cool, like stuff that I've never dealt with, even when I was like 16. Like it's like pre before I was smoking. So it's like really cool stuff. And I'm wicked excited to kind of release that because I think everybody's kind of want to get their hands on those too, and I think they should, just for even like for preservation reasons, and I'm just so much just to get it off me. But so that's they're just showing signs of male sacs now. They're girls. I'm doing a feminized open pollination, but I did save the males because I do find it to be important for stuff like that. I find that important to keep the males with it. So I can't do both right now. So I took a cut of the males and put them aside. But the next round I'll kind of do like an open pollination just for like preservation for myself too. But so that's going on, but I did have a seed launch on Saturday that I dropped on my website, purebreeding.com. So if anybody's looking for that, I do have a few packs of those left. Some really, really, really cool stuff. And yeah, pure_breeding on Instagram, pure_breeding on Twitter, and I think just pure breeding on Facebook. But yeah, feel free to reach out if anybody has questions. Feel free to ask on Instagram. If it has to do with like money related stuff on Instagram, if I kind of seem weird, it's just because Instagram, I actually, and I don't know if you guys know this too, but like, or if it's happened to you guys, but I actually like, this is like a few months ago, but I like mentioned something about money on there, and like Instagram, like pinged me like in the chat or something. And I was I was like, wow, so they literally are monitoring like everything. So anybody who does ask, just if you're business related, just email me at purebreeding, the letter M, letter A @gmail.com. Other than that, feel free to ask what you want. But have you guys, I'm done, but have you guys noticed anything like that? Have you guys heard about that?
I have seen, like when I was selling my book, people would ask how much does the book cost, and in the DMs I would answer, and I might even send a link for them to send a payment before I had my website up. And occasionally it wouldn't even let me send the links to them because it thought I was like spamming people because I dropped the book and so many people were in the DM. So I was, sending out like, here's my PayPal or here's my whatever, if you want send it here, and it wouldn't let me send the links out. So they do monitor and they do try to limit the amount of commercial interaction that happens in the DM, probably because they're trying to limit scams, fortunately. But unfortunately, I think occasionally it's probably like automated, just some robot. I don't think that there's typically a person on the other end. I think they just like I get reported for like firearms and drug dealing, and every single like one of my posts would say like not for sale, but somebody gets butt hurt and they'll go and report your post for like selling weed or something because there's weed in there. So Instagram unfortunately has not figured out the terms of service to help the cannabis community out yet.
Yeah, I think they monitor everything. Like I forget where I was reading, but even if you type something in and don't send it, sometime I forget if it was Facebook or Instagram, but yeah, even if you type something out, oh no, if you send it and then unsend it, retract it back, somehow they save that. Yeah, but
it's saved in their logs forever as a sent message and an unsent.
Even in a regular post, when I wanted to tag, I think it was grow 420 growroomforum.com. If I put that into the .com, it wouldn't go through. I had to take out that link, and then it would be fine. So yeah, they got some sort of automated algorithm taking down some links, at least some links.
Well, speaking of the algorithm, make sure to hit that thumbs up to like the show if you did like the show and enjoy the show, because we get suppressed even on YouTube. Our views, they go up and down. People tell me they get unsubscribed. People tell me that they don't get the notification, even though they turn on notifications and specifically want to get the notification. So you just got to make sure to do all that stuff sometimes and redo it, because I've seen not just on cannabis content, but other content that similar stuff happens. So algorithm or even people actively. I know, unfortunately, sometimes people that are politically active and against it within these social media networks try and go through and delete posts or make posts not show up as much. And that's why I think it'd be cool if they did sort of outsource the algorithm a little bit, so we'd have some sort of idea on if and when things are being sort of pushed and when they're not, and why that would be. So hopefully that happens sometime in the future with one of the social medias. But I don't know. I think in the meantime, we can just enjoy the fact that we're even able to stream this on YouTube, because for so long we weren't able to have any sort of cannabis community like this online in a public setting. And like I'm at least showing my face, Barton was, and I know Matthew has in the past as well, and Kyle and Tao, even all of us have been out there in public talking about cannabis, where for many, many years that would be impossible to do. So I'm glad to have this outlet each week, and I'm very thankful for you guys. So I want to pass it over to maybe Matthew and ask you if you have any final thoughts before we get into the shout out. So this isn't our shout out yet, but just kind of wrapping up the show.
Well, I really like the interaction. I really like the conversations, and we did slip into some heady conversation about, I think somebody in the chat referred to it as ethics, or perhaps like just the state of, the geopolitics of cannabis cultivation in some ways. And I don't know, at a certain point, I think stepping to the 10,000 foot view does help bring a little context, and also looking at the history and all that. So I really enjoyed the various views that we had represented here. And I'm also wanting to say, Jack, that I'm appreciating how you've been moderating the group lately. That sounds really weird. What I mean to say is that I think that you give everyone a fair shake about saying what they want to say about a particular topic, and having a topic oftentimes, available to us to sort of spin off on. I think that's been very helpful for the chat, for the audience, and also for ourselves as well. Certainly, I get to be exposed to things that I don't always get regular exposure to or have to consider. And that keeps me honed, and that's always a good thing. It's great when my leisure activities also keep me informed, right?
Yeah, it's like interesting that this is like a fun time, but we're also learning and growing as we go. And I do intend to, kind of tend to keep it that way, where we can always, what I realized is, even as a consumer of content, cannabis and otherwise, sometimes I go back and watch the same stuff kind of over and over, or I'll go through phases and cycles where I'll look at certain types of content, and then I'll go back and look at like every single video under a certain label. And sometimes the same content creator will have made 1 or 2 or 3 videos about that subject, but maybe their opinion about it changes and develops over the years, or maybe they got more information and they could give a better description, and have just talked about it enough times that it comes out more clearly. And the weird thing is, we could talk about like the very niche subjects and get more and more niche every single week, and then it would become very difficult for any kind of common person to come and just jump in. But if you talk about some of the, like, I'll call them like not basics, but the classic conversations of growing, like a lot of the stuff that we just kind of do routinely and maybe don't think about, you can bring out all these little subtleties and get everybody's different opinions. And if giving everybody a chance to speak on it, it opens up new ideas and thoughts to people that maybe haven't been exposed to it, which is something I really like to do, and have been very grateful for everyone here who has been able to share. And I think that it's been a working formula. We've got a lot of really happy listeners, myself, I guess, being one, being able to participate even when I'm not here. I like to listen to all of you guys on the show and just try and learn as much as I can. So I appreciate your kind words there, and I'll pass it, I guess, next to Tao before, I guess we're at the final 5 minutes. So Kyle already gave his sign outs. So I guess I'll pass it to Matthew for sign outs, and then Tao will be next.
Like I said, good game, everyone. Really enjoyed the conversation, and also the audience interaction as well. And if you're interested to learn more, I implore you to learn about the pests in your area and the various pests that you might encounter in cannabis. Many of the people in the audience I recognize and have asked questions. And so ask them in the comments after this live stream. Ask them on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol, with my pest primer videos about everything from fungus gnats to russet mites to pests that are not even on cannabis necessarily, for growing vegetables and things like that. and various other various other pests like that. And you can also reach out to me for professional inquiries as well at zenthanol.com. And you can follow me on my personal account at SyncAngel on Instagram and on Twitter.
Thank you as always for joining us. And next up, the American one.
Jackie, thanks for hosting, and it's always good to be here and chat up with you guys. Yeah, basically, I have nothing new. You guys went over the topping. I do the same as you guys were discussing with the GML topping. I love that. That's really good for keeping plant height. Like, even if it's not under the fence, if you need it, if you have I have plants underneath a workbench, and when they started getting too tall, I started doing the GML, and that'll work too. So it's really a great tool. But other than that, I'm the American one on YouTube, and the American one _ with _18s on the IG. Most of you know me and know where to find me. And yeah, I have Amy is on Daga.garden if you want to check out Amy Aces. And yeah, that's about it. It's good to be here, and we'll see everybody hopefully this week and later on in some other chat as well. So peace.
The world-renowned Amy Aces. She's internationally known, very popular lady for good reason. Daga.garden to check out those seeds. The American one on YouTube and the American one _ with the Keens on the Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us, Tao. I really, like I said earlier, enjoy this every single week. I'm able to join all of you. I appreciate the chat coming out. Just want to remind them again, next week we're going to do a chat Q&A and potential to have some of the regulars jump onto the panel. So if you don't already have Zoom downloaded, download that, and it'll be again 4 to 6 p.m. on the West Coast next Sunday. So I'm really looking forward to that. Even though I really love these topic episodes, I also tend to enjoy when we have a good chat Q&A as well. So mixing it up keeps it interesting for me, hopefully for the listeners as well. I'm going to try and get this on the podcast as soon as possible. My internet is being weird these last few weeks, so it's taken, like, instead of a few minutes to download, like an hour plus sometimes. So getting it downloaded from YouTube and uploaded onto the podcast, I'm doing it as fast as the internet is possibly allowing me to do. So I appreciate everyone's patience in that. I know most of you probably listen to it Monday, not Sunday night. So it doesn't matter too much, but I do know a few hundred do listen to it the same night on the podcast after. And thank you to everyone who's here live in the chat. It's been a really fun time. Sour Diesel Tangy made me laugh earlier with his, this is the Cheap Home Grow podcast. He wrote out one of the quotes that used to start all the shows when we were kind of talking about the old podcast. So that was a good throwback there. But yeah, grower love to everyone. Rocinante, Staggering Productions, Laura Kemp, and so many more in the chat. We Nerd DWC, a lot of really great people join us every week, and we really do appreciate it. I read a lot of the comments tonight, but didn't put them into the show as much as I will next week. Try to keep the flow of everything going and let everyone get their piece out, and just keep the great conversations coming as much as we can. But with that said, you can see my logo here at Jack Greenstock on Instagram. Don't post there too much, but you can find me there if you want to DM. And Jack_Greenstock is my backup account on Instagram or on Twitter. Then finally, if you want to contact me outside of social media, you can contact me at jackgreenstock47@gmail.com. And if you want a copy of the book, 50 Strains of Green, it's on 50strains.com. And I appreciate the international individual who just ordered one. I'm shipping it out tomorrow morning. So thank you again to everybody for the support and all those orders. Greatly appreciated. I'm happy to share that history of cannabis with people. So it's fun to ship those out, and it's kind of blown away that people are still ordering them. It feels like it's been so long since I made it, but I guess that's how things roll. I'm very humbled and grateful for all the support from everyone, both listening and supporting in other ways. I know I'm not the only one who has products and other things. So I see a lot of the people on this panel being supported by the listeners, and that's what this community is about. I mean, supporting the people that are helping you. And, I think it is a two-way street. I really think that we've gotten a lot from the community. We've learned a lot from you as well. So never stop asking those questions. Keep growing. Growers love. And for Dr. MJ Coco, he would normally say growers love. So growers love from Dr. MJ and Jack Greenstock signing out. Catch you all next week.